All right, guys. If anyone's watching, my name is Avatar Index. I'm just some schmuck who doesn't have a hand, schizophrenic, and I also study magic. So, um, this is not the first time I've appeared on the internet. I had a podcast previously, which no one really cared about, so I'm assuming no one's really going to care about this either. Uh, RuneScape can be a pretty cold place. Very solitary, so I'm just here to keep you company. Maybe you could just have this as some ambience. Uh, I do know a lot of things. It would take me a long time to go through all of them. Um, I have studied the Arcana Tarot for many years. Um, I'm not really concerned about character creation because, yeah, I can always change that later. Um, But yeah, so this is just maybe just to keep myself company, I guess. Cuz yeah, let's see here. Yeah, we're doing hardcore Iron Man for the first time. Um the way I normally play the game is I just do like a retarded amount of smithing. Um but yeah, I don't really know where to begin. Um I was doing some poetry earlier today. I'm trying to write a verse novel. I am a published author. I'm mediocre, I would say. My book is The Dark Lightning Chronicle. Um, it's a fantasy book I wrote in 3 days. And a lot of people may wonder, well, how do you get, 200 pages in 3 days? The answer may surprise you. It's a lot of cigarettes, a lot of coffee, a lot of beer, and a lot of knowing how to meditate. Um, so to explain that, because it's one of those many things I know that isn't really public knowledge. To get into the flow state actually requires a really large amount of meditation. Um, you kind of have to like have your will flow very freely. I know that will is kind of like an advanced concept here, but I can't really like dumb it down any further. Um, so like the way I wrote my book in 3 days is basically you have to find a muse. You have to have an idea to begin with. You have to have something to kind of guide you. And the rest is kind of finding a plot. Um, so you begin with a problem, something. Think deeply about this. Think about such a thing as like, where is there something that I how could I make a moral to this story, right? Like what's the point in this story? What am I trying to educate, right? You spin that into a type of problem. And then after you've made it into a problem, you work your way through the book just writing casually trying to solve the problem. And then the adventure just happens between there. Um, yeah, it's not a particularly good book. It's not a particularly bad book. I'd just say it's kind of mediocre. But I did write it in 3 days, which takes a lot of skill with the flow state. Now, with the flow state, the key is to have a proper amount of distraction. So, like, if you're, and this is like a really big thing in RuneScape, right? The grind, right? So, there's a difference between grinding, which is what everyone tells you to do, and being in the flow state. Being in the flow state is like the opposite of a grind. Um, I've heard someone say with a chart or something that it's when there's a balance between how difficult it is and kind of how interesting it is. And it's like you have to find kind of that sweet spot. And again, it takes a lot of patience because, um, and magically, I would say it has to do with like star alignments and things of that nature. But I don't really study astrology yet, or astronomy rather. But to get into that, astrology and astronomy, it would be about the in-streaming energies of galactic energies that interact with the planetary energy web of the Earth. So that's kind of high level stuff. That's part of the reason why I kind of avoided it, is because it can be really mathematical. And I just find the tarot very beautiful. So that's kind of where my discipline is. Um, but yeah, today is Mother's Day. Today is Sunday, May 12th, 2024. Um, yeah, I'm not really sure what to talk about next. Um, but yeah. one of the things that kind of pisses me off recently is that there's a lot of content that gets fed to me of like this red pill stuff, you know? And it's like, I have a sibling who's trans, right? And it's like, you know, it's really awkward when your YouTube feed is like all of this really negative stuff. But on the bright side, it kind of talks about things like self-help, which is always really nice. You know, like you want someone to kind of tell you how to sort things out, but it's become kind of like the internet is like a public forum. And I'm like, part of the people are thinking like, oh yeah, this is like the Roman Republic and like we just have debates and stuff. And it's like, not really. You know, it's not exactly like Socrates here. You know, I mean, people are just bickering about dumb stuff, which I guess says a lot about the maturity of people. I'm waiting for the internet to sort of clear itself up, you know, like I'm hoping that the internet kind of cleans itself up from all of that negative garbage that we have, you know, not to say anything against the internet, you know, we've all kind of taken advantage of the internet in our own ways, but, yeah. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk about was the idea of schizophrenia, which I think there's a lot of misunderstandings regarding what schizophrenia actually is. And in my experience, I'll start with this. There was a TED talk I watched once about how there was this guy in some, you know, Asiatic country who could like talk to spirits and stuff, right? And that guy was considered like a priest, right? Like they taught him how to do channeling. He became like a very integral member of society. Like he had a really important position. He was the guy who could talk to spirits, right? But in America, we don't have like a lot of mystic traditions that are our own. Forgive me, Scientology. I know you're the true American religion, I guess, because you're actually developed here. But yeah, in America, there's not like a great deal of truly American spirituality, except like maybe the Native American spirituality. But I mean, even then, that's not considered like quote unquote American American. Those are like natives, right? So, yeah, that's a pretty awkward thing as well. It's like how I live in America, but like I can't call myself a Native American even though I'm born here. And I know that that might make people like really upset. You know, I can tend to be like too honest to a fault, but getting back to what I was saying, there was this this thing I watched in TED Talk about how in other countries what we call mental illness is considered like a mental illness here. I think I said that wrong. What other countries would consider a positive mental framework in America, because we don't have spirituality, it's considered very negative. Um, because like this guy was like a channeler, he became like a monk, you know, he became super important. But here in the States, that's just not the case, you know, because we're a secular society. Um, if you don't know what that means, secular means like you don't. It's kind of like being agnostic, right? Like we don't know if we believe or not, right? Um, and here in the States, you know, it's like, oh, you. I think there was a joke about this I heard once as well. It's like you, if you talk to God, you're a priest. If God talks to you, you're schizophrenic. You know, which is pretty offensive. Um, Especially considering the United States is supposed to be like a safe haven for all spirituality, but it really isn't anymore. Yeah, um, I feel like I've covered like a lot of my ideas way too quickly. I'm thinking kind of quickly here. I like to keep my mind very slow, very patient, and very calm. Um, Speaking of which, schizophrenia coping strategies. There's a lot of dudes who get schizophrenia in their teenage years, but also guys in their 20s, right? And the first thing I'd say, if you have schizophrenia, the first thing you should probably learn is to not take drugs, right? Which is something that takes a long time with things like cigarettes and alcohol. The addiction is real, right? But and the next thing is you kind of want to like learn manners inside of your mind, you know, like how to talk politely, don't be rude, don't scream at the voices, you know, that sort of thing. And a lot of people don't really, they're not really nice inside of themselves. You know, they have like a lot of inner conflict and inner drama, which ends up ultimately getting externalized into like real world problems. Um, But yeah, like the balance of it, like you have to have like a pretty balanced mind, right? Like I handle schizophrenia pretty well, partly because I also have amnesia. I have pretty chronic amnesia, actually. I'd say I have like about one heartbeat of memory at every given moment. I live pretty much constantly in the moment. And I have a hard time visualizing things, which, some people would say I was misdiagnosed with the schizophrenia stuff, but because I mean, like the definition of schizophrenia is pretty much hearing voices and things that like aren't physically there. Um, which we could make a comment on like mass hallucinations as well. Like I think that's part of what the aliens are when people are talking about that stuff on the internet. I think that's just mass hallucinations. But yeah, just be polite to your voices and like your inner self, and like try to find guidance in life. I know it's pretty tough out there, especially when you have mental illness and you're like forced to work. I mean, I know that can be really damaging on your mind. I'm fortunate enough that I'm on disability, which is like a whole thing in and of itself. And I have like a support system. Not to say it's always been like that. I've been homeless before, but there's kind of a story behind that as well. My dad has schizophrenia, and I was like a guy who went to church a lot. I explored the various temples of Grand Rapids, which is where I live. Um, and Oh wow, you've been playing for a while. Consider taking a break from your screen. Okay, I guess we got to follow through on that. All right, guys. I guess that's it for now.